Welcome back to Balancing Acts, where we're having a great discussion with Bobby Klink about using online tools as well as all the legal agreements that you have to be aware of in running your online business. And now we're going to talk about business growth and strategy while balancing risk and reward. And Bobby is both an attorney, a founder of software, but he's a business owner too. So many of the things all of us in the audience and other business owners face, he does as well. So, what were your strategies for getting the word out about Plainly Legal and how it could help online business owners?
Yeah, so I have faced a bit of a challenge, which is that when it comes to my products, and this goes from before Plainly Legal, but when I was selling templates, but the business overall, I'm competing for the same or for attention with people who are talking to my audience about how they're going to make more money. And so if you can listen to someone talk about how you can make more money or the boring legal stuff, it can be a challenge. And so we've always faced that challenge. And I've said that considering how boring my product is, my marketing has to be fun. And so I've done that for a long time and made it enjoyable. But I've also made a very conscious decision not to do the obvious thing. And what I mean by that is the obvious way to get the word out would be to tell horror story after horror story after horror story and scare people to death. And this actually, a funny story about this, I was in a mastermind group with other people making 6 and 7 figures in business. And this would have been, I guess, in 2019. And after our first in-person get together, the leader of the group was reading this book. It's called Breakthrough Advertising. It's thought of as one of the great copywriting books. It's from like the 60s. And he took a screenshot of a page that talks about, most copywriters think it's impossible to write a headline for a preventative product. And he was literally putting this in the group for me. And he said, but the writer that said it's not impossible, but what you have to do is make your audience not think about bad results for them, but think about bad results for people they care about. So they were using this person was talking about insurance in that context. And one of the people in the group commented and said, "Oh, Bobby, I could see you talking about how people end up getting divorced and all, just went on this whole other thing." And I was sitting there saying, well, if you get a divorce because you didn't have the right agreement in place, I think your marriage was probably on the rocks to start with. I don't think it was the agreement that or was the problem. But so I've intentionally not done that and instead been empowering. And kind of harkening back to the last segment, I talked about lawyers, and you mentioned, Linda, these lawyers, they're in the protection business. And so, yes, I'm in the protection business, but I'm a business owner first at this point. And so I want to help people understand here are the risks. You have to decide which of these things you're going to deal with. And let me be clear, having spent a lot of time working with in-house counsel at big companies, no one deals with all the legal stuff ever. It just doesn't happen. It is always a matter of triaging and dealing with the most important tasks, and sometimes looking and say, you know what, we have a budget, whether it's money or time, of X this year to deal with legal stuff. What's the most important stuff? And let's deal with that. And so that's the approach I've taken. And when we talked about the audit, that's why when we were creating the audit, we've prioritized the tasks. And we kind of have a proprietary algorithm behind the scenes that's prioritizing based upon the chance of something bad happening, the magnitude of what would happen if a bad thing happened. And those are kind of the bad things. But then the counter is, how hard or easy would it be to solve? So things that you could solve in like 5 minutes, we put as high priority because we're like, just do it, just get it done. But other stuff that's going to cost you time, going to cost you money, we have to say, okay, well, what's the downside here? And balance it. And so I have taken a much more pragmatic approach. And as we move into this, we're moving into a new world or new approach, which is we're going to move to what's called a product-led growth approach to marketing. And that is, I'm going to give people this audit for free. Now, I got to get their attention. I'm going to say, I may have to jump up and down and do other things to get people to pay attention. But once they pay attention, I'm simply going to present the facts to them. Say, here's your free results. You can manage your tasks in here for free. Don't have to think about it. You decide what to do. And I believe, maybe naively, but I believe, and this has been my experience at least, when people know the legal stuff they have to deal with, they deal with it. And so that has been our challenge, but also how we will approach it and how we're going to continue to evolve moving forward.
you know, both in my CPA practice of more than 3 decades, and I teach business planning and strategy workshops for women business owners across the country. And when this topic comes up, I think the same thing when it comes to taxes or anything regulatory or compliance, where you kind of, you know, it's there, but you don't really want to deal with it. I always say, you know, knowledge is empowering. You can then take that knowledge and decide on your own tolerance for risk. It's
Yeah.
not for me to tell you or you to tell them. They have to say, here's my exposure. But what we can do as professionals is to guide them through, you know, kind of putting like a measure of the exposure and how big an impact would that be on their operations or their profit and bottom line if in fact one of these negative consequences happen. And that, I think, that helps you make smarter business decisions.
Yeah.
So you're now developing, it's really like a SaaS product, right? There's a lot that goes into developing the product and having all the integrations work. Were there any setbacks you faced? And what were the lessons learned? Because I'm sure some in our audience are thinking about developing their own IP and software tools.
There have definitely been setbacks. And one of the big challenges I faced is that I would not say I'm a non-technical founder. When you're talking with software and startup founders, you hear people talking about founders and non-technical founders versus technical founders. I don't like the non-technical because I know enough to be dangerous and I understand enough at a high level, but I am not a programmer. I could not code this up. I could not write the code to make this system work. And that in and of itself creates challenges. And it's meant that we've been working with an agency. They do great work, but there's always a challenge when you're working with outside folks. And it's taken longer than we wanted. It has cost more. And that's even though I approached it as a kind of like you would with construction, where I assume it's going to take twice as long and cost a lot more. I had that assumption going in, but still I underestimated the challenges going in. And there have been little things along the way that you don't think about as like even our developers sometimes don't think about. We've had issues with Safari compatibility. Now we fix it each time, but for some reason, Apple, for the most part, its products just work. But its Safari browser is really weird sometimes. And so things like that. Or we'll have people say, well, I'm using it on and they name some browser that I'm like, I've never even heard of that internet browser, but they're running into compatibility issues. So there's a lot of things you just don't think about when you're creating software if it's not what you do all day, every day. And so there's some of that going in, but obviously some of the other issues we deal with is in the past, if we had a support issue, my team or I mean, we could deal with it. I could just go in and fix something. Now, some of the support stuff we can't fix. And, I don't love that I have to go to our developers and sometimes it takes them a day to get to it because I don't like that. I want to solve a problem for my customers right away. So those are some of the challenges, but it's definitely been worth it. And we've had a great group of beta testers, you included, and we knew we needed that because when we were creating the agreements, there is so much conditional logic going on that we either would have had to spend probably multiple months of my team doing nothing but testing it. Or alternatively, luckily we had hundreds of you beta testers who were willing to get in there and help us test it in these big, we called them party calls where we would get on and everybody would test the same agreement and we would be able to see, okay, is the logic working? Yes or no? And we could pinpoint issues and get it fixed right away. So that's been a blessing, but the challenges are the tech challenges. I would say if you're thinking about it, be very careful and think it through because it's going to take longer and it's going to cost more than you're expecting.
Yeah, and technology definitely more, but with many things, the cost cutting, you want to know that every dollar you spend is moving you towards your growth.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you have to be able to manage that, right? That if the funds aren't there, and you can't become a tech expert yourself. So there has to be a certain amount. I assume lessons learned are being patient and being able to communicate with tech developers who often speak their own language, just like accountants and CPAs. So right before we take our commercial break, do you have any, what are the plans for the future of Plainly Legal? Do you have some things coming that you might share with us?
So first, I'll set a long term vision because I like to have people understand. My vision for the software is that ultimately it will really automate the legal stuff. But this is a long term vision, and what I mean by that is my hope and vision for say 5 years from now is that if you're a subscriber to the software, you're going to have things that follow you around the internet in extensions on your browsers, et cetera, that are following and it's flagging issues in real time for you. Like if you go to post a testimonial, maybe you'll get a warning say, hey, do you have a release from the person to post this testimony? And that will literally be happening in real time. That's the long-term vision. Now, the short-term vision, we have a list of things we're working on. We're working on the audit. We're also going to create an AI enabled chat feature, but I like to stress it's not AI chat where the AI is just making things up, but we're creating answers of lawyer drafted answers in the system. We'll first try to find one of those and serve one up, but in a conversational way to help answer questions that people have. We're going to add things like e-signature. So it's just kind of built in. Again, it's a little thing, but having to have your own e-signature system outside of your legal software, maybe it's just easier if we can let you do those things. But we have a lot of plans for those things over time, because again, my vision is ultimately that plainly, and again, maybe this is naive of me, but I think that maybe 5 years from now, the technology will get to the point that software could largely replace what lawyers could do 85% of the time. And I want to build out a system that does that, that just deals with it for you. So you don't have to think about it as a business owner. It's just done for you.
Thank you so much. And I think, thank you for sharing your, just the way you actually grew, the challenges you've had with it for those of us who are thinking about our own expansion. It's very motivating. We're going to take a commercial break, and then we're going to come back and talk about Bobby about his personal insights and foundations and where he's going next.